Testing, testing. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Again, my name is Stephanie Phelps, and I am the Media Relations and Community Engagement Specialist at the Cleveland Restoration Society and a proud member of the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church, where Reverend Dr. Jawanza Kareem Colvin is our pastor. So we're going to try and pick up where we left off because of the weather. And we're going to start with a musical selection from Mr. Obi Shelton.
Lift every voice, so if you can, we certainly want to honor it by standing.
Next, this man needs no introduction, at least in this house, and we are going to have official greetings and welcome from our pastor, Dr. Reverend Jawanza Kareem Lightfoot Colvin.
Good afternoon. What an auspicious occasion for us to be gathered here in this very sacred place, a place that is not only important here in the life of this great city, but also a city that, also a place that is very important in the life of this country. I've greeted you earlier before we went out for the unveiling, and so I want to take this opportunity to just offer thanks. I want to offer thanks first to our friends at the Cleveland Restoration Society for bestowing on us an honor that among many congregations and places and sites throughout our great city, you saw it fitting that the journey that this church has taken over its 93 years was worthy of distinction. All churches have history, but we are very proud of the history of the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. So won't you join me in thanking our friends at the Cleveland Restoration Society, all of their efforts in making this day possible. I also want to offer thanks. I want to offer thanks of those who in 1931 gathered in a step of faith to form a congregation with a future that was yet unknown, but a faith that was rooted in the belief that God had brought them thus far. That congregation in 1931 could have very little foresight to know what would lie before it. the mountains, the valleys, the challenges, and the triumphs that would make it the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. I want to thank Pastor Nix, Pastor Armstrong, Pastor Ward, Pastor Hoover, and Pastor Moss for anything that I'm able to lead or direct or provide shepherding. I stand on the shoulders of some greatness. And so I am blessed to be a part of a grand tradition of community builders, visionaries, spiritual leaders, and activists. Their shoes have oftentimes been very big, but I've found myself stumbling my way forward and have only now found my own gait. But I am ever thankful for the example that was set by those who I've had the privilege of walking with for these years, and even years before this while a student at Morehouse College, where I walked behind him and only admired him from afar, but to now be in a place to call him not only Pastor Emeritus, but indeed friend and family. I want to thank the Hoover family. I want to thank Sister Carol. I want to thank Sister Pat, who each in their own way have been supporters of this congregation and my leadership. There has never been a moment in which this church has endeavored to engage in building, expansion, investment, forward thinking, in which you, Sister Carol, have not invested or sowed a significant seed in this congregation. So I think we owe her a debt of gratitude and thanks. And I want to thank Sister Pat, who has always been one who's offered me a unique perspective of this church and has always encouraged me to walk in my own shoes. I thank you for the opportunities to get to know not only you, but the unique history of this church, the nooks and the crannies, the things I would not have known had you not sat me down and given me a sense of the unique history of this congregation. I will never forget the opportunity when you took me down to your basement. And we went through for hours pictures, and every picture had a story. It was a treasure trove of memories of not only the legacy of your father, but the importance that this congregation plays not only, again, in this community, but in this country. It was almost like a tapestry, a weaving together of both intimate memory, but also significant American history. And so I want to thank you for that moment, and I want to thank you and Sister Carol for your continued support, both personally and pastorally, of this ministry of this church. And I want to thank you, the Olivet Church. It has been a joy. It has been a privilege. It has been a blessing over the course of my 15 years to carry this baton thus far on the way. And as in the tradition of the scriptures and is the anniversary theme, it doth not yet appear what it shall be. So thank you, and God bless you, and let us continue to praise God through this experience.
So now we will try to pick up where we left off by bringing to the mic Mr. Steve Kuhn from the Ohio History Connection, who will present proclamations from the state and also have the marker inscription reading from Deacon Betty Pinkney and Reverend Brian Register.
Hi, my name is Steve Kuhn. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the Ohio History Connection. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this marker dedication today. The mission of the Ohio History Connection is to spark discovery in Ohio's stories, embrace the present, share the past, and transform the future. We strive to do this every day, but we can't do it alone. Historical markers and the people who create them, support them, and enjoy them contribute to this mission as well. There are now approximately 1,800 Ohio historic markers around the state, each telling a unique story and their place in Ohio history. Your marker honoring Olivet Institutional Baptist Church now joins other state markers in telling your story here in the state of Ohio. You are to be commended for taking the initiative and to identify this important historical aspect in your community. The marker that we are dedicating today was made possible through the vision and dedication and hard work of many people. I would like to particularly thank the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church and the Cleveland Restoration Society. These organizations came together around an important part of Ohio's story and dreamed of a way to memorialize the story in their community. They came together to research and submit initial markings, applications to put together for the funding of both purchasing and installing the marker. And believe me, this is a lot harder than what you think it is. It's not a slam dunk. And they really, really got to be commended for doing this. And you really should be proud. So, to mark this special event, I'm proud to present commendations from the Ohio History Connections Executive Director, Megan Wood, and the Board of Trustees. And I've got I'm going to read one, but they both say the same thing. Ohio History Connection commends Olivet Institutional Baptist Church for furthering the knowledge of the state's heritage by placing an Ohio historical marker to tell the story of Olivet's International Baptist Church and its important place in the Cleveland Civil Rights Movement. Here's this, you can come up to, and if I could have somebody from the Cleveland Restoration Society come up, Kathleen Crothers. Thank you for all your hard work. And last, I've got the finally, I'm proud to present the proclamation from the governor and lieutenant governor from the state of Ohio. And I've got it here. See, I don't do this all the time. I'm kind of nervous. So, but thank you. In the name by the authority of the state of Ohio, Michael DeWine and John Husted, governor and lieutenant governor of Ohio, I hereby officially recognize Olivet Institutional Baptist Church historical marker. On behalf of the state of Ohio, we welcome all those who are gathered here for the placement of this Ohio historical marker. Historical markers reflect and honor the people, places, and events associated with our state's rich history. And through this reflection, encourage the appreciation for our past, and we look forward to our future. We commend all those involved for ensuring our state's history is preserved and remembered as we extend best wishes for this memorial event. Michael DeWine, Governor. Thank you.
And now will Mrs. Deacon, Betty Pinkney, and Reverend Register come, please, to read the inscription on the marker.
Hello, everyone. Olivet Institutional Baptist Church, one of the largest African American churches in Cleveland, was founded in February 1931. In 1950, the congregation constructed a new building on Quincy Avenue. The Olivet Institutional Baptist Church ministerial leadership and its congregants were ardent supporters of the civil rights movement, combining social and political action with the ministry. Olivet supported sit-ins to integrate church lunch counters and public facilities in the South and participated in social activism in Cleveland. During the pastorate, 1952 to 1973, of Reverend Olivet M. Hoover, 1921 to 1973, Olivet became a key voice in the civil rights movement. Dr. King, Reverend Hoover accompanied Dr. King to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. The O.M. Hoover Christian Community Center was dedicated by Dr. King in 1966, symbolizing Olivet's commitment to community building and civil rights.
Reverend Hoover established a Southern Christian Leadership Council, otherwise known as SCLC headquarters at the church, which welcomed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during his visit to Cleveland. Reverend Hoover also led the United Pastors Association, otherwise known as UPA, which formed in 1966 as a response to the Huff uprising and sought to eliminate root causes that led to the riots. In 1967, the UPS and SCLC engaged Dr. Martin Luther King for support of civil rights and activities, including Operation Breadbasket, which launched at Olivet and challenged the discriminatory practices of large businesses. The groups also launched a voter registration drive, which culminated with a speech given by King and at Olivet on August 23, 1967. This campaign registered 40,000 new African American voters and ultimately played a major role in the election of Mayor Carl B. Stokes.
Thank you, Reverend Register and Deacon Betty Pinkney. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that our mayor of Cleveland, Justin Bibb, was here. And Mayor Bibb, if you are still here, can you raise your hand? Or Mayor Bibb? Okay, all right. Okay, so we will continue on with remarks from we'll start with Bishop Tony Minor, who is giving remarks on behalf of our Civil Rights Trail Committee Chair, Natoya Walker Minor. So would you please come?
Thank you very much. It's really such an honor to be here, to the pastor of this church, my dear friend, Morehouse brother. We thank God for you, my pastor, Dr. Otis Moss, and his wife, and to, of course, Ms. Hoover, Pat Hoover. This is a wonderful moment, a great place. Such an irony for me to be here for two reasons. One, my wife served as the chairperson for the Civil Rights Trail, and I walked with her very vicariously through all of the sites, and we would talk about the different sites, and she's away. There's a funeral in her family. but she sends these words, and she wants you to know that she was very honored and delighted to be part of this process. And she is quite honored that we have a civil rights marker. It's placed at the historic Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. She writes that this sacred place was the gathering place for intellect, strategy, tactical planning, and prayer for names known and unknown that led with honor and courage to effect change that we're all the benefactors of. She mentioned that I would be remiss, she said, if I did not mention the contributions of Reverend Hoover and Carol Hoover and Pat Hoover, Dr. King and Dr. Moss, titans in the fight for civil rights. But I also must, she states, pay homage to those nameless, courageous civil rights fighters that risked it all so that we could stand here today on their shoulders. We are the dream of our ancestors, and I am forever indebted to all that have sacrificed. Such an irony to be here. I teach a class in Black theology at Ashland, and just this weekend, Saturday, I was talking about the sacred places and spaces in Cleveland. And I talked about Olivet, and I talked about how this was a place for Dr. King, because of his friendship with Dr. Hoover, as a place of friendship and refuge. And how, as it was stated, Operation Breadbasket, so important. I wonder, Ms. Hoover, all of the African Americans in Cleveland who hold corporate offices, if they understand the planning that occurred in this sacred place of Operation Breadbasket. I leave this, 1988, I decided to come back to Cleveland. I graduated from Morehouse, was in graduate school, was working for Andrew Young, and was on the staff of Dr. Lowry. And I was given permission to restart SCLC, and we did it. Some of the plans of the relaunch of SCLC occurred in Dr. Moss's office. As I talked to Dr. Moss about what we would do, and I reminded him that E. Randall Osborne told me that Olivet was the heart and the soul of Cleveland's movement. And I'm so blessed. It was here in the midst of some personal pain that I came here, and Olivet embraced me, Dr. Moss and Ms. Hoover and others. I am truly a son of Olivet, and I am proud to be here today. God bless you.
And on behalf of the Cleveland Restoration Society Board of Trustees, I would like to ask if Mr. Glenn Shoemate is present. If not, we will have the president of the Cleveland Restoration Society, Kathleen Crowther, come and give remarks.
Thank you, Stephanie, and it is such a pleasure for me personally to be here, and on behalf of the Board of Trustees of Cleveland Restoration Society and the staff, congratulations. This is a beautiful moment and well-deserved. Our organization has been leading the effort to mark places in Cleveland associated with the civil rights movement. And it crossed our minds 7 years ago, I think, that we in Cleveland have a civil rights story too. You know a lot of the trails in the South, but we thought we have a story that we would like to amplify. So we are fortunate to have the support of the National Park Service. We convened a task force, which Natoya Walker-Minor has chaired for all of these years. It is not a slam dunk to get the marker, as Steve Kuhn said, and have what we have is a serial, a theme approved by the Ohio History Connection for African American civil rights in Cleveland. We're just so happy that we are able to develop and put the marker in the ground for Olivet. We have installed 8 markers thus far, and they're all for different reasons. This could have been the first, this could have been the second. We have markers perhaps you've heard of in other locations. When we submit these nominations, we use scholars to draft the nominations. We have used Dr. Thomas Bynum, Cleveland State University, head of the African American Studies there. Dr. Donna White, some of you may know Dr. Donna White. She's probably now retired from Cleveland State. And James Robinalt, who wrote the book recently, Ballots and Bullets. And then we have this committee, and the committee, Gwen Chapman's here. Are there other committee members that are here? The committee has been meeting routinely over all of these years. We have a couple more markers that we still need to install, so we're looking for 2 more corporate sponsors or just individuals who would like to help underwrite. It's really underwriting the scholarship and the manufacture of the markers. See me after the program. But I would like to also thank our staff of the organization who works so hard behind the scenes. We have Margaret Land, Ann Doughton, Peggy, our wonderful staff in the back. Please stand and be recognized. Where are you? Come on, go ahead. Some of you may know some of them. But it is really such a wonderful thing for us to be involved with, and we invite you to join our organization to be part of what we do. Thank you.
Now we will have reflections. We will have Dr. Moss come to talk about the history and significance of Olivet.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin my brief remarks by asking that we would take a moment of silence in memory of those who made this moment possible. May we bow our heads in a moment of silence. Let me die working, still tackling plans unfinished, tasks undone. Let me die working, holding on, marching on, carrying on. In the name of love, justice, liberation, reconciliation. Amen. Pastor Colvin, and to everyone gathered, this is a special moment in the history of Olivet, in the history of this community, in the history of the struggle for freedom and justice. A special moment in our lives as we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. We praise God for the life and work and dedication, courage and determination of the late Dr. Ode M. Hoover. Daughters, friends, Carol and Pat Hoover, when Pat Hoover had been instructed not to get involved in dangers and movements and sit-ins, her mother turned on the television, and lo and behold, Pat was on her way to jail. Oh, Pat said it was Carol. Amen. Amen. In those dangerous days, mother turns on the television and daughter is on her way to jail in Nashville, Tennessee. Give her a hand. What a moment. She would go on to become the youngest staff member. This is a new phone, and I still have to learn how to use it and disconnect it, but now I'm going to turn it off completely. Carol and Pat Hoover represent the daughters. They are the daughters of Dr. Ode M. Hoover. And his courage, his determination, it was politically incorrect for him to open the doors of Olivet and give Dr. King a home in Cleveland to carry on the work of liberation. There were those who possibly wanted to do this, but they were afraid. Dr. Hoover knew that it should be done, it could be done, and he did it. So Olivet continues today as a landmark. When it was dangerous to open these doors and bring in Martin Luther King Jr., and not only on one occasion, but to lead Olivet in becoming the headquarters of Dr. King in Cleveland. And let me repeat that Carol went on to become the youngest staff member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I have, and in those days, there are two people present who were on the staff of SCLC during the days of Dr. King, Carol Hoover and Edwina Moss. They have a story of experiences on a day-to-day operation that is known now by a few yet living, but not known by the vast public, and especially the African American community. Thanks to you, Pat and Carol. Thanks to you, Pastor Dr. Jawanza Colvin, for continuing a liberation ministry from the pulpit and the congregation of the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. As great as the presentation of the Nobel Peace Prize was, everybody did not embrace the recipient of that prize. But Dr. Hoover not only embraced it, but Dr. Hoover and his daughter Carol journeyed to Oslo and witnessed the receiving of the Nobel Peace Prize by Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. They were there. Somewhere in my files, I have a letter from Dr. King inviting several of us to come to Chicago in 1957, several months before his assassination, to help lay the groundwork for a new dimension in the civil rights movement. And at the bottom of that letter was a notation to contact a young woman at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference named Carol Hoover to affirm my attendance in Chicago for that historic meeting. Time will not permit to give all of the details for that meeting in Chicago on the campus of the University of Chicago School of Divinity. But there were two individuals that summer who were invited to come to that meeting, and one was named Carl Stokes, and the other Richard Hatcher, both of whom in the same month of that year became mayors of Cleveland and Gary, Indiana. Olivet was present and active in the election of Carl Stokes and the election of Richard Hatcher. Olivet, under Dr. Hoover, was among the first churches in America, especially in the African American community, but not only in the African American community, to develop a Christian community center with full 7-day ministries. I had the honor of coming to Olivet in those days, and Dr. Hoover gave me a tour of this new facility, up and down. and explained its dimension and what its future was. I had no idea at that moment that I would be coming to this place to serve as pastor for 33 years or stand here today. Olivet is a necessary congregation, witness, church, and liberation ministry in history. I have talked longer than I had planned to, but you took up some of my time with your applause. And I thank you. God bless you. That's only one paragraph of a long and continuing story. Thank you, Pastor Colvin. Amen, and praise God.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moss. We love you. And so at this time, we are going to have reflections and some remembrances from Carol Hoover and or Pat Hoover. So please come. Okay. You want to come? Would you like to?
Well, you see, some people will do anything to get attention, so I came in a wheelchair. Especially since I knew Reverend Moss would be talking. I said, that's one way for me to get attention. But first of all, I would like to thank Pastor Colvin and all of the work that has gone into getting us to this day. The staff of the church, the leaders of the church, the members of the church, also our two organizations, and I will follow up with an appropriate thank you to the leadership of both of the organizations. And I don't want to repeat a lot that other people have said, but I do want to say this. I was given 5 minutes to talk about the Civil Rights Trail. And the trail for this church really started with William O. Walker, the publisher of the Call Post, who supported all of our causes in the movement. And some people did not feel that he was going to do much because he was Republican. He took his Republican contacts and he made a lot of things happen, not only for this church, but for some other churches in our community. Secondly was attorney John Kellogg. John Kellogg was the attorney for the church, and he did a magnificent job of looking at every opportunity to create legislation that would help us and to get other people across racial lines. He had very good contacts to help Olivet. The Congresswoman Frances Bolton, she was a huge help along the way. So no one, in those days, seemingly people did not get as hung up on party as they did results and friends. So some of those individuals provided opportunities that enabled us to do some other things. The story of Dr. King and some of the ministers being nervous about having Dr. King at their church for fear that it would get bombed, that's a real story. And I remember some of the conversations that took place in this church, and there was not one officer of this church they thought we would be bombed for Dr. King having an office here. Dr. King's presence in Cleveland really contributed a lot in addition to a healthy community for voter registration, voter participation, which led to the election of both Stokes brothers, Congressman Louis Stokes and Mayor Carl Stokes. Additionally, there were people who were a part of this church continuing to help in the broader community. And that was a real tribute to people listening to the message and following it. When Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize, I had some staffing responsibility, and I never thought that that my father and I would end up on the same stage for that. But it was a great opportunity. It was a great celebration, and Dr. King's humility had a lot to do with what we were able to accomplish, because in his Nobel lecture, he talked about the people of Birmingham, the people of Chicago, the people of many cities, and that he was accepting it for them. And that's always healthy. Now, in every opportunity, you have a challenge. So in Atlanta, as progressive as Atlanta is and was, there was nervousness about having a banquet for the community to come together to honor, as the Catholic bishop said, one of our sons. It took the strength of J. Paul Austin at Coca-Cola, CEO, Dave Garrett at Delta, and again, the Archbishop of the Catholic Church, to say to people, you have to do this. We had been welcomed and well received in New York, and then how do you go through this? But all of it was a learning experience. It just makes you stronger. Coming back to Cleveland, after the Nobel Prize, we did a major fundraising dinner for SCLC. Dr. King came off the Selma March to come because he knew we would raise enough money to get some of the Selma people out of jail and help the families of some of the people who had been incarcerated. The biracial support here in Cleveland is another piece that I think goes on this trail, because this was not just super black people saying we can do this alone. There was a continuous outreach to some of the people here who felt that there should be more support for the work of the movement. Every evening on the Huntley-Brinkley Report, there was the picture from Birmingham, from dogs and those fire hoses and all of the bad stuff. And it really caused people to want to do something. And I think those of us who served on the staff and people who were on the board had to really understand, how do you take advantage of this moment? And I think we understood. Cleveland, again, with some of the black-Jewish relationships, with some of the corporate relationships, stood firm, raised money. Dr. King asked our father the night we had the big fundraising dinner downtown. He said, well, now I'm going back to join the Selma March. He said, you've raised all this money. Can you go with me? He said, absolutely not. You could have every penny we raised. I'm not going to Selma because I'm not that nonviolent yet. but it was all good. When you look at some of the other things, and when I think about some of the other people that helped, Arnold Pinckney was chairing the campaign for Senator Hubert Humphrey, his presidential campaign. And therefore, candidate Senator Humphrey came to our church, talked to our congregation and the Cleveland community on the issue of civil rights, the kind of things that he felt could be done, should be done through the Congress. And that was all good, very encouraging, very, very inspiring. Also, over the years, through our beloved Arnold Pinckney and others, President Carter came to this church and spoke one Friday night, and I sat next to him and kept telling him what he ought to say, to the point where he got up to speak and left me alone. But it was all good. But when I think about the Civil Rights Trail, I have to also include Senator Humphrey, President Carter, because they came here because there was a trail and they wanted to support it. So I've talked past my 5 minutes, Reverend Colvin, so I should. So I think there is a spirit here. I think the trail will continue to be strong and to generate change. One of the people that we found on the trail was Reverend Otis Moss. He came here to preach, and he came to do the church anniversary, and it was after Daddy died, and so he was on the trail, and we said, some of these people you have to pull off the trail and tell them come in and see where we go from here. So it's been all good. The challenge ahead is to keep adding people to the trail and keep the trail moving. We have young Dr. Moss spoke to some of our issues, and I know from some of the classes that are being taught here and some of the messages from Pastor Colvin, there is a trail. We're going to keep the trail going and continue to make change and make a better life for all of the people. I just get so frustrated at going through the downtown streets and seeing all these homeless people. So we've got to do more than just pass by and say, oh, isn't that sad? And so I've been talking about it everywhere I go, and that's got to be, we got to bring some leadership to the trail and from the trail to address that problem. So I have gone over my time. I'm going to be quiet. I want to thank everybody again who helped make this happen, both organizations of restoration and from the state of Ohio. And I'll call my friend Governor DeWine Monday and tell him how all of this went and how well everybody performed. So thank you. Yeah, well, that's what you do. That's how you keep people on the trail. I call the governor anytime I think about something I think he ought to think about, and just keep him on the trail, keep him on the trail. So thank you very much. Thank you, Patty, and I want to thank you certainly for honoring the work, and in many instances, the sacrifice that our father made to help get us to today. And so I will continue to do my part. I basically worry people into helping me. And I'm highly opinionated, so to keep me quiet, they have to listen to me a little bit. So I'll do my part. I know Pat does her part all the time. So it's yours. I talk too long.
I don't need to hold that, right? Okay. All right, so I think this is a full circle moment because my charge is to talk about the early days and what I remember and reflections, and what else did you ask me to do? Remembrances, reflection? Okay, so I remember a lot, but I'll be done with it by 6 p.m. We can all go to dinner. But I think as I thought about it, and it's so much to it. It's such a good story in terms of in the beginning. In the beginning, I think I was, 7 or 10 years old when we came to Cleveland. We came from Tennessee, Nashville, and Chattanooga. My mom was from Chattanooga. My dad was from Nashville. So we were Southerners, and we lived with our grandparents, and we're part of the migration. So somebody comes up north. My dad used to say, "There's no such thing as up north. It's all up south." Because every time somebody comes and you go get your cousin and your brother and somebody comes and prepares the way. So that's how, a lot of us in terms of the values of this church, in my view, came to be. Because what the major things I remember is the whole families. This was a church of families where you had to dress up every Sunday in your Sunday best, where you had to be respectful and be honored, and we had teachers that do that. I mean, you go to Sunday school, if you can't go to Sunday school or church, then you couldn't go anywhere else on Sunday. We had our Sunday clothes, but what impressed me in terms of my memories of the days were the families. A lot of these people are still here in terms of how families were together. And I would always wonder, there was something going on here every night. And I'm saying, it was all these rules. Okay, you got to do this. It's choir rehearsal, usher board number, whatever. Just a lot of activities. And as I grew older, and this whole issue about, civil rights and how people were treated came to be, I would look at the people at church and say, well, it can't be that bad, because look at Mr. So-and-so. He works at General Motors, and they live in Mount Pleasant. That was the place you strive for, Mount Pleasant. And so what is everybody talking about? This looks like the good life to me. And then years later, as I was thinking about how we really got here, I remember that as I said, this church, there was something happening here every night. Every day, every night. And that's how the whole concept of the neighborhood and brotherhood happened, because so many of the people that went to Olivet lived in this community. It was a thriving community, because we had the Sohio gas station on the corner that was owned by a black man named John Lewis. He had the first Sohio franchise in the state, in the country, actually. There was, across the street, the drugstore and the soda fountain. So you go in the soda fountain, you sit on the little benches, and you do that. We had Caremu sort of coming into its own. There was every service available on this street and in this community. It was a community. People that lived here, and there were all of these, now what we see, all that's gone, because those were people's homes. And we had the majority of the, business people, everybody belonged to all of it. So on the east end, there was the drugstore, there was Sidney Barnes' barbershop, there was Carmack Realty, there was John Kellogg's law office, there was a printing shop. Right across the street was George's Deli. And that's where everybody went on Sunday, between Sunday school and church, to George's Deli. So my dad was, he was a big presence. He was a big guy, big voice, big everything. He knew everybody on this street. He knew everybody on the side street, 86th Street. He would go, and if anybody's kid was acting up, he would take them by the collar and drag them home to their grandmama or their mama and say, okay, here this boy was acting a fool. This is what we're going to do for him. He would take the kids to George's Deli, and they would get slices of bologna and Colby cheese. And he would walk the neighborhood, and he would see them. They would sit down, and they said, I'm checking on you. You're doing good. They called him Big Daddy. Yes, Big Daddy, you know, we're doing great. Down the street we had a bank, Black Bank, Quincy Savings Bank. We had a Owsley grocery store. There was every resource in this community. We had the funeral home next door too, C.B. Miller's funeral home, and all the people who owned that stuff belonged to this church. So this community grew and grew and grew. Then we started adding on to the buildings with the, you know, and because the church was built, it was new when we came here. Even though at first sight, let me back up. My dad came to Cleveland to do a revival at Greater Abyssinia. Well, it's Greater Abyssinia, yeah. And when he went back to Alabama, a contingent of people from here came to visit him in Alabama. That's how he got to Cleveland. So there was some building in progress, but the people have run out of money. So that, and you'll see it on those pictures of back in the day. This facade that had nothing. It was just a foundation and some bricks and stuff, and then people had started throwing garbage in there. So somehow they had to clear it. So my dad did whatever you do when you go to the bank and beg the white people for money, and I mean, he did that, unashamedly did that to help build the community. As I said, there were businesses here that were really contributing, but the whole financial thing with whatever happened prior to Olivet, you know, it had to be built. So that's what he came to. They brought him in here. And I can remember he would do things, and I often think about Carol and ask this question of both of them. How do you know how to do that? I mean, where do you learn? My daddy was laying bricks. He had never laid a brick in his life. But what would happen was, in terms of building this community with the families here, people would come every evening and help out. I mean, until you could get Art Sanders to do the redo on the architecture and get all the resources you needed to actually build a church. So I think the value of a lot of this work has to be owed to by the people. The members built this church. And as I said, then we become a big piece of this community in terms of how we related to people. The majority of the people that came here were from 84th, 86, up and down Quincy. There were houses right next door to the church and across the street. All those people belong here. All of them helped every day. There was something going on here every night. And I often wondered, okay, well, why? We weren't required. All we were required to do was show up on Sunday. And you had to go to church. There wasn't no movies or none of that stuff. You go to church, you go home, eat Sunday dinner. They come back for the night service. But all we had to do was to show up. We had a wonderful youth ministry, and we had a great choir called the Celestial Youth Choir. And some of y'all are still around, because they're my age. But they did concerts, and I mean, it was Earl Preston took them under his wing. They traveled the state of Ohio, but their life was church. Everybody's life was church. And I would complain sometimes about, okay, well, this is going on, and Dad would come to, home, and then say, well, I got to be back at the church at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and whatever. So when I learned how to drive, I was saying, okay, well, I'll take you and come back and pick you up. He said, if you can't stay, then you can't take. But what I did notice, and this is later on as we reflected, I'm an adult then, and I would always wonder, okay, so you got Mr. this person, Mr. that person, and they worked in the steel mills and in the car manufacturer. everybody, all these people had these jobs. They made good money, as they call it. They made good money, and they would come to church, and it was like you go home from hard labor, you change your clothes. Because I was saying, well, why are they getting dressed up to come here? And I determined, okay, they're doing that because at work they're Tom, they're boy, they're this, they're that. These folks would come in, they would have their suits on, their shirts and not ties, sport jackets, they would be clean as the board. They would come here every night because they were then deacon so-and-so, trustee so-and-so, Mr. so-and-so. So, you know, I often think about just the overall incredibly huge impact that church has had in our lives. And most importantly, the whole black men thing, because this is where you are somebody. So I think that's why they were committed on every level to do the work. The work is still going on. They're still doing the work. So it served so many purposes. It meant so many different things to many people. That is the value. But the whole family value thing is, you know, really stands out. What interests me about where we are now is this. We've seen this community deteriorate and kind of go away and be done, and here we sit in this place, in this space. So we got this beautiful structure, and what we knew historically as neighborhoods, that's gone. We don't have anything else now but this church in the midst of all this space we have. So my concern is that we have to build a community around this church. That's because we got to bring people back, we got to build a community where people can thrive and live. What are we going to do in here? We got to bring people in. Now, I'm going to tell you, Otis III, last I had changed everything I was thinking about singing. Because after that sermon about the redwood, so I say, and in a lot of ways, we have an oasis here. We've got space, we've got everything. This is our redwood. This church is our redwood. And what we got to do, according to Otis, and I believe what he says, and I'm going to do what he says, we got to plant more trees. We got to plant, and we got to be them, and we've got to plant trees. We got to nourish trees. We've got to bring our whole ecosystem and forest. I learned that last night. Remember he was talking about photosynthesis? Learned that. But I just think that's such a perfect concept, and this is such a great opportunity that we have to rebuild this community. We've got a place to be. We've got a home here, and I think we owe it to our sisters and brothers. So y'all will get home before 6. I'm sitting down. But I appreciate the privilege. I appreciate being back in here. I used to come here. There's something very sacred about this space for me. Old church, new church, whatever. And I used to sit there, and I would always look at the stained glass windows, because it was something about just the quiet and seeing the sun come through it was like it brought the people alive. There were angels on there, and there were my dad and pictures. And it was like, okay, so you bring it into life. So I'm saying, maybe this is a message that, you know what, we can't come and visit. We got to plant trees. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Sisters Carol Hoover and Pat Hoover. And now we are going to have an excerpt of Martin Luther King Jr.'s Nobel Peace Prize speech. And as was mentioned, Sister Hoover was there, as well as Reverend Hoover. And so, yeah, Prester Pickett. Okay.
Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of thermonuclear annihilation. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I still believe that one day mankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed. And nonviolent redemptive goodwill will proclaim the rule of the land. And the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man shall sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid. I still believe that we shall overcome. This faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. I will give our tired feet, it would give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. I think Alfred Nobel would know what I mean when I say I accept this award in the spirit of a curator of some precious heirloom which he holds in trust for its true owners. All those whom truth is beauty, and beauty truth, and in whose eyes a beauty of genuine brotherhood and peace is more precious than diamonds or silver or gold. Thank you.
Thank you, Prester. And to close us out, before we adjourn to the O.M. Hoover Center, is Mr. Obie Shelton.
I think this song honors and celebrates the the struggles, the rich history of Olivet, but it takes a look forward as I look at the beautiful renovations here. And says, you know what? I feel like going on. I feel like going on. The trial's dark on every hand. I feel like going on.
God bless you. God bless you. This concludes our program, but please let us all go over to the O.M. Hoover Center to fellowship and enjoy each other's company and this occasion together. God bless you. We'll see you in the O.M. Hoover Center.